I want to talk about another term. It's Dotoku. And it's important. And I want to talk about why it's important. But before I go into any of that, I want to acknowledge before coming in here tonight, I read the news. I just glanced at it and uh, was confronted with the story that the leader of one country is saying that it's going to end a civilization, maybe starting tonight. So we need to be careful. We need to be careful when we think about things like that. We need to ask ourselves, is what we're talking about here important? Because we know that's important. I think it's important. I'm going to make a case. But the stakes are really high. Dotoku, it's in the translation of the Shobogenzo that I usually use, they translate it as a saying. Uh, it's 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 a kind of weird word. It confused me for years because the do means way, and we use that a lot in this practice. It's the path. It's the way forward. And toku is something like attainment. So I would see this phrase and I would think it meant the attainment of the way, and that felt like it fit right in with the language that we use for everything else. I didn't question it. But it's actually a very specific term, and it has to do with expression. It isn't about the way, not exactly. The translation I use calls it a saying, but it also has to do with saying something. It has to do with the ability to say something, the ability to express this. And I think the reason it's held up as one of these words we should know is partly historical, because this Zen tradition rests on this story, at least, that Bodhidharma, the first patriarch, described Zen as a transmission outside of the scriptures, a transmission beyond words and letters, which can lead us to this idea that there's this invisible thing. There's a kind of there's a kind of magical thing that gets passed from person to person. We can't really talk about it. You know it if you know it. Dogen, however, if we pay attention, was a talker and he was a writer. Right? He wrote so much. He said so much. Between what he wrote down and the recorded sayings of him just standing up and just putting out the Dharma again today and again the next day and again the next day, he clearly thought there was something to say. Something that needed to be said. His teacher, Nyojo, actually had a lot to say about this. And one of the recorded conversations between Dogen and his teacher is that Dogen said, it is said in all corners of the world, the transmission is outside the scriptures. This is the great meaning of the first ancestral teachings coming from India. What does this mean? And Nyojo's reply was, why should the great way of the Buddhas and ancestral teachers concern inside or outside the scriptures? Yes, it is said the transmission is outside the scriptures, simply because apart from what Kashyapa and others transmitted, the first ancestral teacher came from India to China and intimately transmitted the way and bestowed the method of practice, which is to say, he did it his way. Therefore, they say the transmission is outside the scriptures. But, he says, the world cannot have two Buddha Dharmas. And what was meant by that is that it can't be that there's this body of teachings that is developed and leads up to the time of Bodhidharma, and then there's this whole other Dharma that comes up from Bodhidharma's time that now is suddenly unspeakable and invisible. There's just the one Dharma. So if you have to talk about it, you can talk about it. If you need to show it with your body, you show it with your body. It's not either or. It's not that now we close our mouths. There's something to be said. Dogen took this to heart. He was always trying to say it. He always thought that he could express it a little bit better, a little bit more. There is a chapter of Shobogenzo called Dotoku. And as I was reviewing it for today, I found myself thinking maybe we should just go through the whole thing. It's really, really good. But today I'm going to give you just a taste. It opens like this. The Buddhas and the ancestors are their sayings. This is Dotoku. Therefore, when the Buddhas and ancestors select Buddhas and ancestors, they invariably ask whether or not they can say something. They ask for the Dotoku. This question they ask with their minds, they ask with their bodies, they ask with their staffs and whisks, they ask with the pillars and lanterns. If they are not Buddhas and ancestors, they have no question. They have no saying, for they have no place for them. So in a way, this is contextualizing all the stories that we get as Zen stories. The koans. Someone goes to someone else and says, what is your dotoku? In other words, do you have something? Do you have a way of explaining this to me or a way of showing this to me? Do you have a way of sharing this with me that will somehow open me up? Dogen says, if you don't even have that question, you're not really doing this. But also you need to have the answer. You need to have some way of responding. I think of all of these stories, they are all stories of bodhisattvas either trying to find their way or trying to help another bodhisattva find their way. And it's done with words, it's done with actions, it's done with these dramatic gestures. There's a story here. It's really good. Let me see. Okay. There's a teacher. The teacher with the name is Shui Feng. And in the vicinity of this teacher, Shui Feng, there was a hermit monk. He was a Buddhist monk, but he had gone off into his own little space. And there he maintained the practice. He did it on his own. He lived a very austere life. He didn't shave his head anymore. He became a kind of wild character. People knew he was out there. One day, a monk went to the hermit, went and found him, and asked the question that we find over and over and over again. He said, "What is the intention of the ancestral master coming from the West? Why did Bodhidharma come from the West?" And the hermit said, "The stream is deep, the ladle handle long." And the monk had no response to that. Okay. And so he went to Shui Feng, who was nearby, and he told him the story. And Shui Feng said, "That's really interesting. I'm going to check him out." So Shui Feng went to the hermit, and he brought his attendant, and he told the attendant to bring a razor. And when he came upon the hermit, he said, "If you can say something," again, this dotoku, "if you have dotoku, I won't shave your head." He's holding the razor. And the hermit goes and he washes his head, and he comes to Shui Feng and presents himself to have his head shaved. And Shui Feng shaves it. Dogen says, "This single episode is like the singular appearance of the Udambara," which again, we bumped into this last time. It's the flower that the Buddha held up. He writes, "For now, let us consider what is this question, if you can say something, I won't shave your head." People who cannot yet say something, upon hearing this, if they have the ability, will be startled. And if they lack ability, will be at a loss. He doesn't ask the hermit about the Buddha. He doesn't speak of the way. He doesn't ask about samadhi. He does not speak of dharanis. Posing this kind of question, though it may resemble a question, is also kind of a statement. And from Dogen's perspective, this answer that the hermit gives of coming forward and just offering himself is dotoku. He doesn't have to say a word, but he meets that moment. When the Buddha holds up a flower and Mahakashapa smiles, it's dotoku on both sides. When Shui Feng goes to this hermit who has stepped away from the community and he's kind of doing his own thing. And he says, if you can say something, I'll let you do what you're doing, right? I'll let you stay as you are. And this hermit completely lets go. He doesn't resist. He doesn't say, this is my identity. He doesn't push back. He doesn't explain. He enters into what's happening with this great act of letting go, this great act of receiving. And in the way that we understand this story, in the way that the story comes to us, the bodhisattva who is Shui Feng recognizes the bodhisattva who is this hermit. Dogen says, this is a friend meeting a friend. Shui Feng pulls him up just a little bit. And the hermit pulls Shui Feng up a little bit. At this point, this is Dogen, had Shui Feng not been that person, he would have thrown down the razor and given a great laugh. Ha ha! However, since Shui Feng had the power and was that person, he immediately shaved the hermit's head. Truly, were Shui Feng and the hermit not only a Buddha with a Buddha, it probably would not have been like this. Were they not one Buddha and two Buddhas, it probably would not have been like this. Were they not a dragon and a dragon, it probably would not have been this. The black dragon's pearl, though the black dragon never flags in its determination to keep it, falls naturally into the hand of the one who can take it. And this is the image we've spoken of in the past. This black dragon, he holds the pearl. The pearl is the truth. It is the Dharma. It is awakening. He holds it under his chin. And he will fight you to the death for it. And he also really wants you to have it. Saying, that's the moment. This moment that seems like nothing. A monk shaves another monk's head. What I want to say about a story like this, and about this idea of Dotoku, is that it matters. And if it doesn't matter, if these stories, which are kind of cute sometimes, or kind of funny, they seem to happen in a space where nothing else is happening, right? They can seem like a game. So many of these, it seems as if there are no stakes at all. A monk just approaches another monk and poses a question or poses a challenge. And then someone says something really clever or really cryptic. And then the punchline is, that was important. If we take that at face value, if we take these stories as being only as important as they feel on the surface, then we're holding tight to a tradition that doesn't really matter. We're holding tight to a tradition that in the end is really just about us and about whether we can figure it out, whether we can have some sort of insight that feels good or looks cool. That we can have that kind of spontaneous wisdom that doesn't necessarily change anything, but makes everybody say, wow. You can read this tradition in that way. There's a lot to support the idea that this is really just a kind of game. And that when these two people meet on the road somewhere, they're just kind of wrestling it out. And maybe there's a winner and maybe there's a loser. Maybe someone, in some of these stories, someone's just embarrassed. And then we can applaud the one who was the winner. But if we understand these stories as the stories of bodhisattvas who are seeking bodhisattvas, who are trying to know what it means to be a bodhisattva, if we see these stories as people trying to figure out how to express the truth of this moment in this moment, it changes. To go back, there's this scriptural tradition that builds up to this tradition that we're in. And it offers the foundation of things that we are supposed to understand, the things that we're supposed to take in. We're supposed to understand that we're going to grow old. We're supposed to understand that we're going to get sick. We're supposed to understand that we're going to die. And that everything about us and everything around us is going to change. We're asked to take that in and to hold it, to figure out what to do with that. And that's its own lifetime of practice. And then this tradition comes along and says, all of that plus, you have to respond. Not just to those sufferings, but to everything, to all of it. And with every moment, with every generation, we become more aware of what that is, of what is going on in the world, of what suffering is in terms of scale. Yes, we understand that everyone gets sick and everyone gets old and everyone dies, but we also understand that a lot of people die in avoidable ways, and they suffer in avoidable ways. They're made to live in fear in avoidable ways because there are other people who make choices and impose that suffering on them. We live in that world. And we know the suffering that's around us on our block, but we also know the suffering that's around 10,000 miles away. And so to respond, to speak the Dharma, being the truth, with your words or with your body, is to speak to that truth as well. Not just to the things that we absolutely know and the things that we hold in our own bodies, but also to the terror of the things that we can't quite comprehend, that we know are happening somewhere and that we can't stop them. Our response includes that. This idea of Dotoku. It's not just that there's going to be this one moment when this one person comes to you and asks the hard question and you know what to say, and boom. It's that in the face of all the suffering of the world, you have to figure out how to sit right now. You have to figure out how to hold your body right now and how to breathe right now. You have to figure out what the next word out of your mouth will be right now. I am very clear, and the tradition is very clear, that Zen is not here to teach you what to do next. In the face of anything, whether it's something in your own family or something across the world, what Zen does do and has always done is it teaches that what you do matters. Every single thing that you do matters. And the way that you hold your body right now is the way that you're holding the world. And the way that you are holding the world, at least in some small measure, is the way that the world is holding the world. When you know that, that's what Dogen describes as knowing and having that question. When you don't know that, you lose sight of what matters most, which is that what you have is all you have. And that this moment is the only moment. And that in this moment, whether you scream or eat ice cream or sit facing the wall, consciously or unconsciously, that is your response to the whole world. And that is the thing you're trying to say to it. And that's where I'll stop.